interrogate more. There's been a lot said about, oh, the truth is somewhere in the middle. I mean, facts are facts. The standing orders are laid out in black and white. And there's clearly a cut in the opposition speaking time in relation to Taoiseach's questions. So, for example, I have Taoiseach's questions today, but I may not have that next week. And it's a chance for every TD, and by the way, the backbenchers could have used it at any time in the last number of years, to question the Taoiseach. It's open to all. And by cutting that, it is the Taoiseach being less accountable to the Dáil, at one very important time in the week. So that is a cut. But the other issue is the leaders' questions, and the fact that they're willing to go out on a limb to have somebody who was declared corrupt effectively in a tribunal to have this much power in the Dáil is another angle. And I think the other issue then is order of business. Order of business used to be open to any single TD, by the way. In the previous Dáil, I would have hopped up to raise repeal or other issues that the government wasn't dealing with. It's actually been confined to the leaders of a group as it is, and now it will be halved. How in 30 seconds can you seriously raise an issue on the order of business, which is an important thing at the beginning of the Dáil week? And then the other issue is the priority questions. The fact that they put them in with no additional time, of course that's a loss for the opposition. So, want to raise one other thing. There's a slot that was in previous Dáils that they haven't reinstated, which is this private members' business. There's a lottery for bills. Like I have bills, Paul has bills, on issues that won't be able to be taken in the Dáil unless they reinstitute that, and that hasn't been done either. So I think there has to be a point made. I think they are preparing for unpopular decisions that will have to come in front of the country very shortly. The water charges was floated, the one-off payments for the cost of living, but obviously militarisation, Gaza, it's the opposition that has held them to account on those issues, not their own members. There's no question that Michael Lowry and his, compliant pro-government group is going to hold the Taoiseach to account on those issues. I just wanted, the second issue that I'll mention that I'll be trying to raise with the Taoiseach is the snub that was given last week by the refusal of anyone in government to meet Francesca Albanese when she was here in this building. She is the official UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine, and I just actually went and looked. They are experts in human rights that are commissioned by the United Nations because of their expertise. The fact that nobody from the government met her, I'll be questioning why. If the government is so concerned about Palestine, why would you not go and meet somebody like that? And she made it very clear that Ireland should be doing more. It should be passing the Occupied Territories Bill. It should not be allowing US troops use Shannon. And so I'll be questioning the government on those issues.
Just in terms of the changes to standing orders, I was on drive time yesterday with Minister Alan Dillon, who was on to defend the changes to standing orders, but not just defend the changes to standing orders, defend the fact that they're going to go through today, if the government has its way, without any debate, it is pretty unprecedented to have significant decisions taken whereby there is a significant division without any debate in the House. So he was on to defend this, and then when he repeated the government's lie that not a single second is being taken from opposition time, and when challenged on this by Sarah McInerney, who pointed out the order of business time being halved, who pointed out the Taoiseach's questions being halved, he said, sorry, I'm not au fait with that. I mean, I think that is absolutely incredible. The idea that they're going to ram this through, or try to ram this through today, when the ministers who are going to vote for it don't even know what they're voting for. It is fundamentally undemocratic that they're out on the radio, in the public, repeating their lines which are not based in reality, and then want to vote without even having a debate. We need a debate so people like Minister Alan Dillon can be informed on what he is voting for or not voting for. And there's a lot of deliberate obfuscation by the government about what's happening here. They're relying on the fact that, standing orders are written in very technical language. Your average person isn't going to go and look up the new standing orders and compare it to the old standing orders and see what it means. But I would just make a couple of quick points in terms of elaborating what it means in real terms. One point to say is that this is the third iteration of proposal from the government in terms of changing the standing orders. At every step of the way, these have gotten worse, not better. They haven't moved towards compromise, they've moved away from compromise. So originally it was about recognising Lowry as effectively an opposition technical group. Then it was about creating a special category for Lowry with all the rights of the opposition and a little bit more rights on top of that. And then the third version that we have before us is not just facilitating Lowry to be in government and in opposition at the same time, but actually also facilitating Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael backbenchers to be in government at the same time, giving them leaders' questions, giving them priority questions, and crucially, cutting time from the opposition, key opposition slots, where our opportunity to hold the government to account in order to facilitate that. When they say not a single second is being taken from the opposition, that, as Ruth has outlined, is simply not true. So the things that they're doing in simple terms, they're giving leaders questions every single day to the Lowry Group or Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. That is unprecedented in the way that the Dáil has functioned, to have leaders' questions be used by someone other than the opposition. This is our opportunity to hold the government to account. They're halving the time available for the opposition to oppose the Dáil agenda on a weekly basis, and they're halving the number of Taoiseach's questions every single week, from 90 minutes to 45 minutes, from 6 questions to 3 questions. I've seen Micheál Martin now being challenged on this, and it's good, because for a long time this was out there and people weren't really discussing it. He's been challenged on it and saying, it wasn't really used very well, and sure, the Taoiseach's very busy in any case doing a lot of very important things. This is a question of basic accountability of the Taoiseach to the Dáil, and he's halving our opportunities to do that. They're giving extra speaking time in every single debate to the Lowry Group, and as Ruth outlined, they're giving a priority question on every question to ministers. They're giving a priority question to either Lowry's group or Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. That is coming from opposition time. So one less other question will be taken in ministerial questions, and the chances are that other question will be a question from the opposition, because the majority of the other questions are from the opposition. So it's just all the way down the line. They are shifting time from the opposition to the government, including the Lowry Group, and attempting to diminish the accountability of the government to the Dáil. The other point I'd make is that this is in direct contravention of what they promised in terms of getting over the impasse back in January. They said it, there was an agreement. Then the Chief Whip read out what was the agreement, and the agreement was that the government would work to secure agreement as soon as possible and acceptable to government and opposition. And there's been no attempt to find that compromise. We've come forward with proposals. They haven't seriously responded to those. This is not about the Lowry Group having speaking rights. Of course they should be speaking rights. Of course they should be facilitated to ask questions and so on. So on that basis, I really feel it is our duty to do everything that we can to stop this going through today. This is not just about the rights of the opposition right now, it's about the rights of the opposition into the future and the capacity of this Parliament to function to hold the government to account. Final point I'll quickly make, I think another example of an unpopular decision that the government wants to be able to ram through without serious questioning is the issue of getting rid of the triple lock. Last week in the Dáil, James Geoghegan claimed that the government had a mandate for getting rid of the triple lock because he said Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil both stood in election manifestos promising to get rid of the triple lock. That is just simply not true. It's true that Fianna Fáil, not very clearly, but spoke about reforming the triple lock mechanism and so on, at least doffed their hat to what they're trying to do now. Fine Gael did not mention anything of the sort. They spoke about protecting active military neutrality and didn't mention the triple lock whatsoever. So the government has no mandate to getting rid of the triple lock, but yet they're determined to do it. Let's remember that the second Nice Treaty would not have been passed if it wasn't for the insertion of the declaration into the EU treaties explicitly referencing the triple lock. So the triple lock has been endorsed in referendum by the public, and yet the government plans to get rid of what is at the core of our neutrality, in the words of Micheál Martin, without any new referendum, simply by a decision in here. It's why we very much support the private member motion from the Social Democrats tomorrow to have a referendum on this. We have a clear position, but we agree that the public should decide, because this is fundamentally about neutrality. Final point, just to endorse what Ruth said about Francesca Albanese, and to add the other significant criticism that she made, as well as of RTE, was the decision of the government to sign up to the IORHA definition on anti-Semitism. Hasn't received enough discussion, but the fact that the UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine is pointing out that this signing up, which seems to have been a kind of personal project by Micheál Martin, is extremely, extremely troubling. They've explicitly have PQ answers saying that they're signing up not just to the definition, but also to the examples, because it's the examples. In past, the last government said, well, we kind of agree with the definition, but we don't accept the examples. The examples are particularly troubling, where the majority of the examples are equating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, and this is about silencing discussion on the reality of what Israel is doing.
Well, can we expect a walkout from opposition TDs this afternoon in terms of speaking rights?
I mean, I've seen online a lot of people who support the opposition's stance on this, saying that you need to walk out in order to bring the Dáil down. I would just make the point that if you walk out of the Dáil continues. They can have a quorum made purely of government TDs. So obviously there are tactical discussions about how best to stop the government ramming this authoritarian move through. Personally, I'm not convinced that the walkout is the best mechanism to do it at this stage. I think what's generally being discussed in terms of the opposition is being in the Dáil chamber and using our voices and so on to prevent the government ramming this through. I think that's what's most effective.
So what might that involve? Might that involve trying to filibuster or just to outshout?
Yeah, well, I think if you look back at the example of January, the government has a majority, yes, but democracy isn't just about the rights of the majority, it's also about the rights of the minority. And the opposition in January was able to hold up the election of Taoiseach, bring the government to a negotiating table and agree the outlines of a compromise, which then have been abandoned. I think that proves that it can work, and those sort of tactics, I think, are what will be necessary.
Do you expect to have been ejected from the chamber by this time in a couple of hours?
Ejected?
I hope not. I hope not to be ejected from the chamber.
Have people ever been ejected from the chamber?
So is there going to be lots of shouting then at 2 o'clock, like back in January? We're not going to hear anything, and everyone just screaming across the chamber at each other? What's going to happen?
I think you can also stand up. You can also stand up in protest. I think you're not meant to be able to conduct the Dáil if people don't sit down. That's another option. So we look at all the different tactics and consult, but it's ludicrous to leave, in my opinion, and just allow them to pass it and then back to business half an hour later. So you have to have an effective protest.
And have you spoken to Labour and Sinn Féin? Is there a unanimous decision on what you're going to do come 2 p.m?
Well, myself and Paul, I haven't been at the meetings, obviously. So
well, maybe Paul, is there unanimous?
I wasn't there, but Richard was there. I think there's general agreement on doing everything in our power to prevent the government getting this authoritarian move through. And I think we don't want to be in a position to be shouting in the Dáil or whatever, and I see Simon Harris saying, behaving like a creche or whatever. Look, that's not what we want to be doing. But this, for us, isn't some small thing. This is going to set up how the Dáil runs for the rest of this Dáil term and into the future. And I think we have a fundamental responsibility as opposition TDs to try and defend the rights of this opposition and oppositions in the future to hold governments to account. And therefore, of Dáil business is sometimes necessary, and I think it will be necessary at this point, unless the government, and I don't see it happening, comes to their senses at this late moment, agrees to have a meeting, agrees to work to a compromise, reconvenes the Dáil Reform Committee. I'd say, the Dáil Reform Committee hasn't met in a month. Just the government walked out. They passed their own proposal to come up with that proposal, and now they've come up with their proposal. They haven't reconvened it. There's no attempt to find a solution whatsoever, whereas we're repeatedly saying we want to have meetings, we want to find a solution. We've put one solution on the table, we're open to others.
Does the government's proposals, if they go through, does that affect the formation of committees in any significant way?
They don't currently. This is the thing that strikes me as strange, right? Because Alan didn't had it wrong again on the radio yesterday. When I got the standing orders proposals, I thought somewhere in here is going to be a standing order to change to effectively say that the Lowry group would take committee positions from opposition rather than government. And that isn't there. And therefore, in terms of committee positions, my understanding is that the Ceann Comhairle's ruling that they're not part of the opposition and therefore would be taking committee positions from the government would be in effect. But then I don't understand why the government is delaying the formation of committees. And to be clear, like, that is what is happening. Like, I know the government's been on saying we're blocking the formation of committees. Like, that is not true. I was at the door of the business committee Thursday before last, where we proposed, we could have a committee on selection next week to form, because it will be on the basis of the Lowry Group positions coming from the government side. So the government has been delaying on that. So I suspect that if the government gets this through, they will then bring forward new standing order changes to work on the committee changes. There has to be some reason why they're delaying it, in order to say that they get them from the opposition side rather than from the government side, to increase the majority of the government plus Lowry, or the government including Lowry, on the committees. But it's really not clear. But again, just like we have repeatedly said, we're happy to form the committees because, again, from our point of view, if we form the committees now under the current rules, the Lowry Group will come from the government. That's exactly what we think should be happening, and we're happy for the committees to get up and running.
If this goes beyond tomorrow, is the opposition willing to continue to block Dáil business from continuing? Like, will this go on and on and on?
I mean, I think, and I think there will be further discussions this evening, I would say, depending on what happens today with all of the opposition groups. But I simply think we cannot allow this to go through. We cannot allow it. We cannot allow it today. We cannot allow it tomorrow. We cannot allow it Thursday. And like you saw in January, at a certain point, the pressure of public opinion, which I think is overwhelmingly on our side, will tell on the government. And if we hold the line and refuse to let them